Robert Downey Jr., Whitney Houston, and Charlie Sheen, three names that once commanded the world's adoration under the spotlight, now echo like whispers from the inferno of fame and ruin. These weren't mere casualties swallowed by Hollywood, they were the brightest stars, self-immolating in a dramatic hunger only the killer glow of an industry without a blade could feed. Three fates. 3 degrees of collapse, different origins, different voices, different fractures, yet sharing a common destiny, plummeting from heaven while the world still applauded. Downey, a child of cinema. Raised in the haze of smoke and dialogue, once hailed as the prodigal prince of a new generation. When he stepped off screen in Less Than Zero, he was no longer just an actor. He was a living character, touching the hearts and addictions of an entire generation. But Downey's real life was darker than any role he ever played, long nights of unconsciousness. Arrests with a gun still in his hand, and mornings waking in a jail cell with no memory of who he was. Perhaps the moment Downey stumbled into a strange house and slept in someone else's bed wasn't due to amnesia, but because it was the first time he slept without dreaming of his own death. Whitney was different. She wasn't a rebel from the start. She was an angel with gilded wings. A voice deemed from God in a mortal body. But angels, when they fall, often hit harder than ordinary mortals. People once believed that voice would save a generation from chaos, but no one could save Whitney from Bobby Brown. Their marriage was a slow-motion explosion, where love and drugs swapped places. Where the singing was gradually stifled by bruises on her chest and the acrid smell of crack cocaine. When she gave that interview, her eyes glazed over, saying crack is whack, people laughed. But only those who had seen an angel break her wings truly understood that laugh was her last plea for help. And Charlie Sheen, if Downey was a tragedy, and Whitney a lost saint, then Charlie was a hurricane that refused to be saved. He didn't fall. He hurtled into the abyss with the speed of a cursing meteor. From Platoon to 2.5 Men, Sheen acted and lived as if there were no tomorrow. He hired escorts with a list longer than a movie script, injected drugs into his veins, and called it creative fuel. When he announced he was HIV positive and confessed to hiding his illness from dozens of partners, the world was shocked, but Charlie himself felt relieved. Because in the end, his only regret was not burning everything down faster. 3 people. 3 legends. 3 public accidents on the highway of fame. But what truly haunts isn't the fall, it's how all 3 stood up, walked on, and continued to perform when they were hollowed out inside. That's the art of Hollywood, teaching a child to act out pain, then applauding when it's real. Downey returned, not as someone who merely stumbled, but as a survivor of a civil war with himself. He speaks of the past with a wry smile, but everyone knows within that smile lies a graveyard full of his old selves. Whitney never got to return. She died in a bathtub. Water and time blurring everything, except her voice, still echoing somewhere like a phantom melody. And Charlie? Charlie lives on. But in his eyes now, there's no fire, only ash. No one wants to touch ash, even if it was once gold. Hollywood didn't kill them. It just handed them liquor, drugs, flashing lights, and a contract. Then it sat back and watched them do the rest. In the theater of fame, no one hears the cries for help, only the applause. And when the curtain closes, the audience rises, leaves the hall, abandoning 3 souls still singing, still performing. In a play whose ending was written before they even learned their lines. Their stories remain a chilling testament to the fragile line between genius and self-destruction. A dark undercurrent flowing beneath the glittering surface of the dream factory. Hollywood has witnessed many spectacular falls, but few have plummeted from such heights to such depths as Robert Downey Jr. Only to climb back out of that darkness with a fire still in his eyes. He wasn't just an actor, he was Hollywood's living experiment, giving a child born into cinema. Bathed in the light of fame from infancy, and observing how long it would take him to break. Robert John Downey Jr. was born on April 4, 1965, in the heart of New York City, into a family of artists whose sun rose and set to the rhythm of the film set. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was an avant-garde filmmaker, eccentric, unconventional. His mother, Kelsey Ann Ford, was an actress with eyes as melancholic as an October afternoon. They didn't teach their son to be good. They taught him to be a dreamer, to know how to pull focus, to embody a role, and to take a swig of liquor without flinching. Robert was acting at 3 years old, making his debut in his father's film Pound, 1970, as a puppy. At 7, he was smoking marijuana, given to him by his own father, a strange and poisonous rite of passage that blurred the lines between parental guidance and perilous initiation. This early exposure to substance use, often described by Downey himself as a bonding activity with his father, laid a treacherous foundation for his future struggles. He grew up like a distorted jazz melody, without rhythm, without a clear beat, yet full of improvisation and raw, untamed energy. People called him a genius, not merely because he was intellectually brilliant, but because he could act out a pain he himself had never named, a deep-seated anguish that resonated with audiences. In Less Than Zero, 1987, his role as Julian, a drug-addicted scion spiraling into depravity, was a fateful touch. No one believed Robert was merely acting, they felt he was living the part. Those scenes of frantic shaking, begging for money, then collapsing in the street, required no acting. The director just had to roll the camera and wait. They praised him, lavished him with golden words, significant roles, and a red-carpeted path, but tragically, no one truly asked, "Are you okay?" The acclaim only served to deepen the chasm between his public persona and his internal turmoil. Robert's career was a runaway express train, no brakes, no driver, careening forward with dangerous momentum. After Chaplin, 1992, where his transformative portrayal of the iconic silent film star earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. He was hailed as the Laurence Olivier of the new generation. This critical success should have been a launching pad for an even more illustrious career, but standing at the peak of glory, his hands had already begun to tremble. Drug cravings arrived like familiar guests, uninvited, unannounced, seizing control of his fragile psyche. He tried everything: heroin, cocaine, hard liquor, as if frantically searching for a door out of himself, a means to escape the internal demons that tormented him. He once famously said, "I have a gun in my mouth, and my finger is on the trigger. I like the taste of metal." Not everyone understood the profound despair behind these words, but anyone who has stood before a mirror at 3 in the morning, looking at an empty self, would recognize that statement as a harrowing confession of a soul on the brink. The mid to late 1990s were no longer the era of the cinematic prince. It was the era of the indictment. Robert was first arrested in June 1996 for possession of heroin, cocaine, and an unloaded .357 Magnum handgun. When asked by police why he was driving naked in his Porsche on Sunset Boulevard in such a state, he just laughed, his response chillingly detached, "I thought I was at a friend's house." Weeks later, in a deeply unsettling incident, he mistakenly broke into a stranger's house in Malibu, climbed into bed because he genuinely believed it was his own. No one laughed then. No one pitied him. The media swarmed like vultures, and Robert was no longer a prodigious talent, he was a punchline, a cautionary tale, his public image irrevocably tarnished. From 1996 to 2001, Robert moved in and out of rehab facilities and prison like a relentless pendulum, his life a grim cycle of arrests, relapses, and court appearances. He was fired from the popular television series Ally McBeal in 2001. Even though his charismatic performance as Larry Paul was widely credited with revitalizing the entire series and earning him a Golden Globe Award, the industry watched in despair. Studios closed their doors, producers hung up their phones, unwilling to take a chance on such a volatile talent. America's most promising actor was no longer an investment, he was a personal liability, a ticking time bomb. His once soaring career resembled a luxury sports car plunging into a ravine, not because of engine failure, but because the driver had fallen asleep in a hazy stupor between 2 heroin doses. His future seemingly irrecoverable. But the strange thing was, Robert didn't die. Unlike Heath Ledger, whose tragic passing at 28 shocked the world, or River Phoenix, who succumbed to a drug overdose at 23, those talented souls who collapsed before the storm could fully abate, Robert survived. He survived not because he was inherently stronger, or possessed a unique resistance to the siren call of addiction, but because one woman, Susan Levin, saw in him what the rest of the world had forgotten, a heart that was still beating. A flicker of light amidst the overwhelming darkness. Susan wasn't a starlet or another Hollywood distraction. She was an intelligent, clear-headed film producer who possessed an unwavering resolve and a profound sense of pragmatism. She didn't care about Robert's past or his infamous reputation, as long as he kept his word. They met in 2003 on the set of Gothica, a psychological thriller where she was a co-producer. When filming wrapped, Robert, deeply smitten and recognizing something profoundly different in her, proposed. Her response was clear and unwavering, "Only if you get sober. I'm not going to be another statistic." And for the first time in his life, fueled by a genuine desire for change and the prospect of a stable future, Robert Downey Jr. chose sobriety with an unyielding commitment. Sobriety wasn't a sudden, magical transformation. It was a warped, bloody, relentless, filled with setbacks and moments of agonizing temptation, and occasionally, small failures. He didn't just retreat to a spiritual center. He engaged in a holistic approach to recovery. He hit the gym, dedicating himself to physical strength. He studied Wing Chun martial arts, finding discipline and focus. He meditated, seeking inner peace. He became a vegan, purifying his body. He replaced the destructive ritual of needles with the rigorous discipline of self-improvement. And when Jon Favreau, the visionary director of Iron Man, took a monumental gamble on him for the lead role, a decision met with widespread skepticism and outright panic from Hollywood executives, Favreau uttered a single, profound sentence that silenced the entire film industry: "No one understands Tony Stark better than Robert. Both have built weapons and been imprisoned by them." It was a moment of profound recognition, a testament to the transformative power of shared experience and a daring belief in second chances. Iron Man, 2008, wasn't just the film that launched the multi-billion-dollar Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was the resurrection manifesto of a man who had seemingly died, had rotted in the public eye, and yet returned with eyes burning like newly kindled fire. Robert didn't just act Tony Stark, he was Tony Stark. A brilliant, flawed genius. A man who built intricate masks and lived behind a dazzling facade of wealth and arrogance. But when night fell, only the hollow echo of himself remained. A vulnerability that resonated deeply with audiences. The character's journey of self-destruction and eventual, reluctant redemption mirrored Downey's own in a way no screenwriter could have conceived. Robert's comeback is one of those rare resurrections that Hollywood, with all its storytelling prowess, couldn't fictionalize. Because it was real. It was agonizingly painful, a raw, unflinching testament to human resilience. And it silenced all of us, who had once scoffed at his spectacular fall. People often ask, what made Robert Downey Jr. different from the countless others who were lost to the industry's darker currents? The answer isn't merely talent. Many more talented people have died tragically young. It's not simply luck. He had opportunities and squandered them dozens of times throughout his descent. The true turning point, the profound difference, was that for the first time in his life, he genuinely wanted to live, not for cinema, not for fame, but for himself, for Susan. For a future he could finally embrace with clarity and purpose. Today, when you see Robert on stage, speaking with newfound wisdom, laughing genuinely with fans, holding his wife's hand with quiet devotion, people tend to forget who he once was. They see Iron Man, the quintessential superhero, the embodiment of charm and intelligence. But if you look closely, if you truly observe, you'll see in his eyes there's still a slight shadow, an indelible trace of the pain he endured. Because some scars aren't left on the skin, they are etched deep within memory. A constant reminder of battles fought and won. There are falls no one truly sees, the private descents into despair. Only you know how long it took to get back up, how much courage it demanded. Robert Downey Jr isn't perfect, nor does he claim to be. But he is living, breathing proof that even when you've hit rock bottom, when you've been buried under layers of media scrutiny, public prejudice, and the crushing weight of your own addiction, there is still a path, a glimmer of hope, if you choose to fight for it and find the strength to walk it. And perhaps, that's what makes him one of the most beautiful and enduring symbols, not just of cinema's incredible power, but of humanity's extraordinary capacity for redemption and unwavering resilience. His story resonates far beyond the silver screen, a beacon for anyone who has ever faced their own internal war and dared to believe in a second act. Whitney Houston entered this world like a sacred hymn, resonant, pure, and full of promise. Born on August 9, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey. Into a family where music flowed in their veins, her mother was the renowned gospel singer Cissy Houston. She was a cousin to Dionne and Dee Dee Warwick, and was the goddaughter of the legendary Aretha Franklin. People often declared that Whitney was simply born to sing. Her lineage was a blueprint for superstardom, a destiny seemingly etched in the very fabric of her being. But destiny is sometimes a mournful, default melody, written before we even know we won't be able to change the lyrics. A tragic premonition woven into the tapestry of her life. Whitney's voice, it wasn't just a voice. It was a kind of magic, a transcendent instrument capable of stirring the deepest emotions. It was clear as crystal, powerful as fire, and when she first uttered a note in "I Will Always Love You," the whole world seemed to hold its breath, mesmerized by its raw beauty and emotional depth. She quickly became known as The Voice, a title that underscored her unparalleled vocal prowess. Her debut album in 1985 catapulted her into stratospheric fame, delivering hit after hit and making her an instant global sensation. But beyond the stage lights, when the thunderous applause had faded into the quiet of the night, Whitney was often left with only one thing, an empty loneliness that no hit song, no record-breaking sale, no amount of adoration could ever truly fill. This profound void, a silent ache beneath the surface of her glittering success, would ultimately prove to be her undoing. There was a time when she was an irreplaceable icon, a period of unparalleled success marked by 6 consecutive multi-platinum albums, numerous Grammy Awards, staggering record-breaking sales, and the unwavering, intense gaze of the entire world upon her every move. She broke racial and gender barriers in the music industry, paving the way for countless artists who followed in her footsteps. Her reign as pop and R&B royalty was absolute. But at that very moment, within her, another tune was playing, a dark, distorted melody, weaving like insidious smoke around her spine, a harbinger of the chaos to come. And the one who often amplified that destructive tune, whether intentionally or not, was Bobby Brown. The meeting between Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown in 1989, culminating in their marriage in 1992, was one of the most tragic turning points in 90s music history, a pivotal moment that sent shockwaves through the industry and her fanbase. Bobby, a rebellious, handsome, intense R&B star, carrying within him an untamed energy no one could control, was in many ways the very flame that burned everything she had tried to preserve. A volatile element introduced into her meticulously crafted world. They married on July 18, 1992, a wedding the press, with a sense of ominous foreshadowing, called as bizarre as a dusty dream. No one in their inner circle or the public truly believed they were a good match, a clean-cut, angelic pop princess marrying a self-proclaimed bad boy, and tragically, everyone who harbored those doubts was eventually proven right. Whitney Houston didn't fall solely because of love, or because of Bobby Brown. She fell because she chose to use love, or rather, the distorted, codependent version of it she found with Bobby, as a painkiller, a desperate attempt to numb the deep-seated wounds that had festered within her for years. The wounds from her childhood, the crushing expectations, the relentless pressure to maintain a perfect image, the documented sexual identity doubts and alleged abuse from a family member. The conflicts with her strong-willed mother, and the profound isolation she often felt as a black woman navigating a predominantly white-dominated industry, they didn't bleed openly. But they suffocated her spirit slowly, insidiously. Bobby wasn't the singular cause of her unraveling. He was merely the catalyst. A potent accelerant that ignited pre-existing vulnerabilities, and cocaine, heroin, marijuana, hard liquor, these were the insidious companions that joined the destructive dance. People often claimed Whitney started her addiction after her marriage to Bobby Brown, painting him as the sole architect of her downfall. The truth, however, was far more complex, and often the opposite. According to many close to her, she had experimented with drugs before, like so many lost young stars adrift in a spotlight they weren't taught how to turn off, seeking solace or escape in the transient high. But after her marriage, what was once an occasional habit spiraled, becoming a ritual, then a consuming religion. Once, in a stark and haunting interview with Diane Sawyer in 2002, she admitted with chilling clarity, "Drugs are my friend. When the whole world turns its back, it's still there." It was a raw, unfiltered confession of profound loneliness and dependence. It was also, unmistakably, a desperate cry for help, largely unheard by a public more interested in scandal than salvation. Whitney and Bobby, they loved each other the way two damaged souls, caught in a mutual spiral, find each other in the wreckage of their lives. Their relationship was a volatile, unpredictable tempest. They argued, destroyed, abused each other, forgave, and then continued the agonizing cycle, trapped in a self-perpetuating drama. Long nights in their opulent mansion were reportedly filled with smoke, the strains of music, and the deafening silence of unspoken pain. No one truly knew where the line between love and destruction lay in their chaotic union. When their reality show, Being Bobby Brown, aired in 2005, the public was genuinely shocked. The carefully cultivated image of the uncrowned queen of pop shattered before their very eyes. Whitney then was an unfamiliar version of herself, eyes bloodshot and glazed over, voice hoarse, figure gaunt, and laughing erratically as if it were all some macabre joke. The show, intended to humanize them, instead exposed the devastating reality of their lives. The cruel irony was that despite her visible decline, Whitney's ethereal voice, though sometimes strained, remained irreplaceable, still possessing moments of breathtaking beauty. She made attempts at comebacks, tried to rebuild her shattered career, and released new albums. But each return, though met with initial enthusiasm, ultimately felt like a failure. Not because her talent had entirely vanished, it flickered, still capable of brilliance, but because the public and the unforgiving music industry had changed. They didn't need the broken, vulnerable Whitney, they craved a younger, cleaner replica, one that didn't carry the visible, broken shards of a troubled past. And that, more than any substance, killed her, slowly, surely, chipping away at her spirit. There was one fateful night, February 11, 2012. Whitney Houston was found unconscious in the bathtub of Suite 434 at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, Los Angeles. just hours before she was set to perform at Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy party. The ceiling lights were still on. The phone hadn't been hung up. Music was still playing. But Whitney was gone. Autopsy results later indicated the cause of death was accidental drowning, complicated by atherosclerotic heart disease and chronic cocaine use. It was the tragic, silent death of an icon, not because the glory faded, but because the profound sadness, the internal battles, and the relentless grip of addiction had finally won their long, drawn-out war. What made Whitney's death a complete and utter tragedy wasn't merely how she departed, but how readily people forgot what truly mattered, reducing her complex life to a simple narrative of drug abuse. They remembered Whitney of the hit songs, the soaring vocals, the dazzling performances. They conveniently forgot Whitney, the girl who had to hide her true self, her alleged bisexuality, in an industry that demanded a clean-cut image, the woman who was sued by her own father for money. The artist who slowly lost her iconic voice because the world demanded unattainable perfection, relentlessly scrutinizing her every move. They forgot that the woman who sang "I Have Nothing" wasn't just performing a powerful song, it was, in retrospect, a heartbreaking prophecy of a life consumed by its own emptiness. Whitney's death is one of the quietest, most poignant pauses in the music industry's history. No major scandals on that day, no violent crimes, just the silent, agonizing deterioration of a magnificent soul bled dry. And the strange, horrifying thing, the tragic cycle didn't end there. 3 years later, in January 2015, Bobby Christina Brown, Whitney and Bobby's only daughter, was also found unconscious in a bathtub at her home, in a chillingly similar state to her mother. 6 months later, after being in a medically induced coma, she passed away on July 26, 2015, at the tender age of 22. People quickly labeled it the Houston curse, a facile explanation for a profound tragedy. But in reality, it was simply the continuation of a devastating cycle, a generational trauma that no one effectively intervened to save. A girl born amidst brilliance and ruin, never truly taught how to live independently, only seen as an extension of her famous parents, an exhibit of a misguided and destructive love. Whitney Houston was not merely a victim, she was a warrior who, despite immense inner strength, ultimately lost a prolonged and brutal battle against her demons and the pressures of her world. And perhaps, in the saddest love song of her life, a melody woven with unshed tears and unspoken pain, she left behind a lyric no one truly heard: "I didn't know my own strength." Perhaps she knew her strength. Perhaps she always knew. But in a world where talent is relentlessly exploited, where fame is a double-edged sword that cuts deeply, where love can be distorted into control and destruction, strength, even monumental strength, isn't always enough. Sometimes, desperately, someone has to truly see you, to reach out and save you. And Whitney, despite her millions of fans, despite her family and friends, in the end, no one truly saved. Her voice, once a beacon of hope and joy, became a final, sorrowful echo of what was lost. In the dazzling and often deceptive world of Hollywood, where the spotlight blazes with blinding intensity and every narrative can be meticulously painted in rosy hues, Charlie Sheen stands as a singular, almost anomalous, case, an iconic figure whose very essence became synonymous with chaos, boundless rebellion, and an unwavering defiance of societal norms. He wasn't merely an actor with a career spanning decades, marked by both soaring triumphs and spectacular failures. He was the living, breathing embodiment of intense internal battles. A relentless descent into stretches consumed by addiction, headline-grabbing scandals, and a labyrinth of complex, often volatile, relationships. Charlie Sheen, through the crucible of all he has endured, is arguably the most stark and unsettling personification of survival in a world perpetually rife with self-inflicted ruin and existential darkness. The esteemed actor Martin Sheen and his elder brother, Emilio Estevez, had both carved out significant and respected careers in the entertainment industry. This lineage offered Charlie an immediate advantage, a golden ticket into a competitive world. However, from an alarmingly early age, the distinct signs of rebellion, an innate wild abandon, and a profound disinterest in conventional boundaries began to surface within him. His formative years were not exclusively a period of developing formidable acting talent. They were simultaneously the initial, insidious missteps into a dangerous world dominated by drugs, alcohol, and a series of increasingly intricate and self-destructive relationships that would define his public narrative for decades to come. One could unequivocally assert that Charlie Sheen's career was less a journey and more a series of extreme, dizzying ups and equally dramatic, precipitous downs. He rose to stratospheric fame as the magnetic star of iconic films like Oliver Stone's Platoon, 1986, Wall Street, 1987, and the immensely popular Major League, 1989, roles that not only showcased his undeniable talent but also catapulted him to the very pinnacle of Hollywood's leading men. Yet, running parallel to this illustrious and commercially successful career was a tumultuous and spectacularly volatile personal life. This period was characterized by a relentless barrage of domestic violence scandals, notorious and often public lawsuits, repeated hospitalizations due to severe addiction, and a torrent of shocking, unfiltered statements that consistently stirred public outrage and captivated the insatiable appetite of the tabloid media. What truly set Charlie Sheen apart, and what made his saga so compellingly tragic, was the almost perverse manner in which he confronted these monumental difficulties. Instead of bowing his head in shame, or attempting to discreetly suppress the damning revelations, he actively chose a path of unbridled, almost performative, rebellion. He transformed his entire life into a genuine, unscripted reality show, a continuous spectacle played out before a global audience. His interviews, often delivered with manic energy and disjointed logic, and his public statements across various media platforms were not mere personal disclosures, they were meticulously crafted, or perhaps spontaneously combusted, parts of a larger, deeply chaotic story he seemed compelled to tell, a narrative brimming with inherent contradictions, breathtaking unpredictability, and a perverse sense of unyielding defiance. The zenith of this self-created spectacle arrived in 2011, a period infamously dubbed winning by Sheen himself, culminating in his dramatic firing from the wildly successful sitcom 2.5 Men. This very public meltdown, featuring outlandish claims of having tiger blood and winning DNA, became a cultural phenomenon, a car crash that no one could look away from. Then, in November 2015, Charlie Sheen once again sent shockwaves across the globe when he publicly announced that he was HIV positive. This wasn't merely a private health disclosure, it was a direct, confrontational challenge to entrenched societal prejudices and the lingering stigma surrounding the virus. Instead of retreating into hiding or succumbing to fear, he chose to openly and frankly confront his diagnosis, displaying a chillingly unique brand of courage and a way of living that seemed utterly unafraid to expose the most brutal and intimate truths of his existence, regardless of the personal cost. However, to merely characterize Charlie Sheen's life as solely a string of vices, self-destructive habits, and high-profile scandals would be a gross oversimplification. Beneath the veneer of the flamboyant, self-proclaimed rock star from Mars lies the more complex and poignant story of a man, deeply wounded, perpetually seeking acceptance and genuine love in the profoundly artificial and often transactional world of Hollywood. He serves as undeniable proof that even the most outwardly rebellious and destructive individuals often harbor profound pain and deep-seated emotional wounds that are not easily healed, scars that no amount of fame or fortune can erase. His numerous hospitalizations, the seemingly endless cycle of lawsuits, and the relentless onslaught of public scandals, surprisingly, did not completely break him. On the contrary, in a twisted turn of fate, they paradoxically became an integral part of his identity, and undeniable chapter in his unfolding story that the audience, morbidly fascinated, simply couldn't help but be curious about and follow. Charlie Sheen, in a way that few others could, transformed personal tragedy into a perverse yet compelling form of living art, an art characterized by unyielding defiance, an audacious sense of indifference, and a raw, almost shocking, courage to confront himself, even in the most humiliating and personally devastating circumstances. Yet, behind the glitz of his televised performances and the sensationalism of his shocking stories, there resides a person of unexpected emotional depth and profound psychological complexity. Charlie Sheen has, on occasion, shared poignant insights about the immense difficulties he faced in maintaining stable personal relationships, the crippling loneliness that often accompanied his frenetic lifestyle, and a pervasive sense of being profoundly misunderstood by both the public and those closest to him. His outward rebellion, his notorious self-destruction, and his seemingly impenetrable bravado might, in fact, have been a deeply ingrained, albeit maladaptive, coping mechanism, a desperate and ultimately self-defeating way for him to protect himself from even deeper, more unbearable emotional wounds. One could thus say that Charlie Sheen is an intricate image of contradictory survival, a man caught in a perpetual tug-of-war between profound self-destruction and the elusive hope of redemption, between an uncontrollable rebellious streak and a fundamental human need for acceptance, between the crushing weight of darkness and fleeting glimpses of light. He lives on, a figure often perceived as an indomitable disruptor, seemingly immune to consequence. Yet, beneath that hardened exterior, he remains a vulnerable man, perhaps in desperate need of forgiveness, understanding, and the possibility of true healing, forever navigating the wreckage of his own making. His life, in its tumultuous entirety, serves as a stark and unflinching mirror reflecting some of the darker, more exploitative aspects of the entertainment industry, the rapid consumption and discard of talent, the often merciless cruelty of a fickle public, and the immense, almost unbearable, pressure that celebrity status inflicts upon its chosen few. Charlie Sheen is far more than just an actor. He is a potent symbol, a living cautionary tale, embodying the harsh and often unpalatable truth about fame, that success, particularly of the magnitude he achieved, sometimes comes at a price so exorbitant, so devastating, that it beggars belief. In conclusion, Part 3, focusing on Charlie Sheen, transcends the mere recounting of an individual's life. It serves as a profound and unsettling lesson about the inherent fragility of the human spirit when confronted with the dazzling yet perilous world of Hollywood. He is indisputable proof of survival amidst utter wreckage, a testament to the complex, often chaotic, yet undeniably persistent existence of an individual caught within the unavoidable maelstrom of life. His story, more than any other, forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that while the spotlight can illuminate greatness, it can also cast the longest, darkest shadows, and sometimes, the most dangerous performance is the one we play for ourselves. When the stage lights dim, Hollywood is no longer just a place of glamour and applause. It's an underground battlefield, where once shining individuals must fight themselves and the haunting shadows that stalk them day and night. Robert Downey Jr., Whitney Houston, and Charlie Sheen, three icons, three tragedies, stand as the most vivid proof of that dark side. Undeniably, they once stood at the pinnacle of glory. Robert Downey Jr., a symbol of spectacular resurrection. He was once condemned by society, sent to rehab, plunged to the depths of addiction and legal trouble. But then, he spectacularly reversed course, making a brilliant comeback with his role as Iron Man, an emblem of strength and redemption. He taught us that, sometimes, the abyss isn't the end, but a stepping stone to rise. But his story was far from simple. It was a prolonged struggle, a wrestling match with inner darkness, a relentless effort to escape a tainted past. Robert not only conquered addiction but also had to confront the pressures of fame, the relentless scrutiny of the media and public. He wasn't perfect. But that very admission made him more relatable and moving than ever before. In contrast, Whitney Houston serves as a painfully stark warning about the fragility of fame. Her angelic voice once captivated the world, but behind the spotlight lay a life filled with trauma, tragedy, and addiction. Whitney wasn't just defeated by drugs, but also by tangled relationships and immense pressure from the entertainment industry. She is a symbol of irreparable breakage, leaving an aching sorrow whenever she is remembered. Whitney's story also reflects society, where, at times, people demand too much from stars, forcing them into unbearable molds. The pressure to be perfect pushed her onto a path of self-destruction, costing her very life. And that forces us to ponder, should human value be measured by fame or success? Charlie Sheen, with his rebellious nature and shocking pronouncements, is a different yet no less tragic case. He was the man who turned life into a play, both a destroyer and a hero in the public eye. HIV was not just a disease for Charlie. It was also a symbol of his fall from grace and the dark secrets within Hollywood's glittering world. He lived in the gray area between truth and deceit, between wild abandon and silent agony. Charlie never apologized, never regretted, and never tried to be a role model. He was simply a man trapped by temptation, burning himself up in a dance of death that only he knew how to perform. And it was this freedom that made him a symbol of an era, where all rules were broken and all limits were tested. Overall, the lives of these three individuals clearly show us one thing. Behind the dazzling glamour lie silent battles, deep wounds, and risky choices. Hollywood isn't just a place where dreams take flight, it's also a bloody canvas of souls fighting themselves. And perhaps the greatest lesson we can draw is this: fame and talent are never absolute protections for individuals against life's challenges. We all have our own shadows, our own temptations, and no one can avoid moments of weakness. But what makes the difference is how each person confronts the darkness. Robert Downey Jr. chose to fight and resurrect. Whitney Houston, despite her failures, left behind a magnificent musical legacy and reminders about human value. Charlie Sheen, in all his chaos, is a lesson about freedom coupled with responsibility, and the danger of living too close to the edge of self-destruction. Ultimately, their stories are not just for Hollywood. They are for all of us, the dreamers, the strugglers, and those who have stumbled. They are a reminder that, in this life, light and darkness always walk hand in hand, and each of us needs to find a way to be true to ourselves, no matter how difficult or arduous the journey. And when night falls, when Hollywood's dazzling lights fade, the stories of Robert, Whitney, and Charlie still echo in the air, like sad songs. Tragic poems, unending narratives of humanity, the fall, and above all, redemption.